What's going on, guys? Hope you guys are having a good day or night whenever you're watching this. Gonna be taking a look today at building a new PC. Now, I talked a little bit about it in the Mac shopping video that I made, but I've been a PC gamer for a while, and I'm also considering maybe switching to my PC for like recording vids, because it would potentially be a lot easier to get the power that I need. And then, you could go cheaper on the Mac, or just, keep what I have now, honestly, probably. But I used to be super into computers and tech. I still follow it a little bit, but it's definitely not what it used to be. I'm not up to date with all the newest stuff, but I know a decent amount. I built the PC that I have now myself, and I'm sure I'll build my next one, which is kind of what I wanted to look at today. But yeah. So this website is a very popular website in the computer/tech space. It's called PC Part Picker, and essentially what it lets you do is, if you take a component, for instance, the CPU, which is like the brain of a computer, it allows you to shop for essentially anything in that category, add it to your list, and then it will sum up the price, as well as give you potential compatibility issues or concerns. So it helps, if you don't know everything, you don't have to spend a bunch of time reading through specs and such. It'll tell you if certain things are compatible, or maybe if you don't have enough high enough wattage power supply, etc. But my current PC has an i7 9700K, which is 5 generations ago. It's probably so old it's not even going to be in here, but this is the kind of current day equivalent. I believe i7 14700K, but Ryzen has actually become a super big contender with Intel. This is AMD's chipset, and yeah, it used to be that Intel was kind of the only one way to go, but AMD, I believe, in a lot of ways, people are actually bigger fans of it now. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone follows it, closer than I do in the comments, but typically how it works is, for Intel, there's an i3, Intel Core i3, which is super low end. I don't even know if they make it anymore, because I don't see it here at all, but that could just be because none of the people who use this site would buy it. And then they have i5, which is like kind of like your mid-range, and then they have i7, which is, enthusiast. It's a little more powerful, and then i9 is like hardcore, super powerful, but the most expensive. And most people, that's overkill. So I'd say the most common ones that people use is probably the i7, maybe the i5, depending on, what kind of games you play and things you do with the computer. And I'm not quite as familiar with how AMD does their specking, but I believe it follows roughly that there are multiple tiers within, say, the Ryzen 5, which it looks like is their 6-core offering. And there's a 5600X, 7600X, 7700X, etc. But then Ryzen 7 is like the upper tier enthusiast one, and there are a couple tiers within that. So there's 7700X, 7800X, and then above that there is Ryzen 9, which is a 16-core one. And you get the idea. But I don't actually know what I would go for if I was to build a new one. I have heard a lot of people in the space say that the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D is the way to go versus something like an i7. You can see they're almost identically priced. So I think I may go Ryzen on my next build, just because the community tends to tend towards what the better value / actually sites called, one big one is called User Benchmark, that allows you to compare performance of CPUs or GPUs, which can help when you're, looking to pick and build components. It'll show you like how much more performance you'll get in a specific category, for instance, or how many more FPS you'll get in certain games. It's pretty cool. And then as far as coolers go, so what gets mounted on top of the CPU, which you typically see, if you look in the case, a lot of people have, cool ones. They're either big fans or they have, lights on them and etc. And it goes to a liquid AIO in the front. So if we click on it here, I can kind of explain it a little bit better. So there are fan versions which have heat sinks that air passes through, and that is connected directly to the chip, which gets very hot during use. Or there are multiple sizes and varieties of liquid cooler options in which this little rectangular portion that you see in the middle is connected by two tubes to an actual radiator, similar to how a car might work. Air is passed through that, and the liquid is continuously circulating, which then cools the metal. Typically, if you are running really high temperature CPUs, I think you would tend towards like a liquid cooler, and I have that now. I have a 240 radiator, which is two fans. But the air fans have actually caught up pretty well with the liquid coolers. So, from a budget point of view, most people would opt for the coolers. I don't actually have, enough research that I've done to pick one or another, but I think for the sake of the video, I'm just gonna throw in a Noctua cooler. Noctua makes very quiet fans. If you guys ever hear like your PC rev up and the fan starts spinning really loud, or even on a laptop, it's so annoying, especially when it's on, consistently. So you want something that's going to be quiet. So Noctua makes a really nice one. I believe Deepcool is pretty popular, but I don't know a ton about them. There's a couple other, like Be Quiet. This is another big one that obviously, is catered towards being quiet, but we're going to pick a Noctua for now. And you'll notice here at the bottom, although they make a disclaimer, it would tell you here if there's any notes about compatibility between parts. So that comes into more play, like when you're picking, for instance, a motherboard. So it's going to automatically sort my socket type to what the CPU I picked would fit in. So in theory, it's already done the work of eliminating all of the motherboards that will not work with your AMD chip. Here is another spot where you can kind of pick and choose what options you care for. So different motherboards have different things on them. For instance, in the top right, you can see those 4 vertical lines are slots for RAM. Some smaller boards, you may only have 2 slots. And under some of these pretty panels that you see are what are called an M.2 slot, which is a new form of SSD, or a solid-state drive, which is essentially a hard drive that works through electrical connections. I don't know the specifics of it, but it's not physical disks. And they are remarkably fast, and since they are mounted directly on the motherboard, they are even faster. So that is a big thing that is on most boards nowadays. Another thing is how many connections it has for things like hard drives, GPUs, etc., as well as the overall form factor. How the motherboards and case sizing works is there are a couple different tiers. There's ATX, which is the largest. There is Micro ATX, which is kind of an in-between size. It is a scaled-down version of ATX. And then there is a mini ITX board, which is even tinier. You can see one here. It just looks like a little square. So if you see someone with a very, very tiny PC, chances are it has a mini ITX case / motherboard. But you can see the max RAM that it can support also decreases as you decrease in size, as well as the number of memory slots in general. But some of these boards also have mounted Wi-Fi, so Wi-Fi is not something that inherently comes with a PC. It's becoming more standard on motherboards nowadays, but for a long time you had to pay extra to get a motherboard that would support onboard Wi-Fi, or you'd have to use an external Wi-Fi card or USB adapter or something of the sort. So the B650 is typically like the budget option, I believe. I don't remember exactly what the letters mean. Some of these will allow you to do overclocking, which is essentially when you add extra voltage to the CPU to eke out extra performance. And you typically need a special board, I believe. Like for Gigabyte, I believe you need like a Z motherboard, like Z650 for instance, Z370s, I think the one I have. That would allow you to overclock. These ones don't give you all of the same controls, but they're cheaper because of that. So, I'm gonna pick this, B650, even though I got a CPU that might be able to be overclocked. I'm not 100% sure. It is a lot of work, and if you're buying a good enough CPU, it's not really necessary. So unless you're super into it, I don't think I'll care to do it. And then memory. So right now I have 32 gigabytes. I have 4 8GB sticks. I originally just had 2 8GB sticks, and then I added 2 more because it was not cutting it for me. RAM is what's gonna allow you to have multiple things running concurrently. For instance, like Google, if you want to have a bunch of Google tabs open at once, the best way to, allow yourself to do that is to have a lot of RAM. And when you have constraints on RAM, that's sometimes why people go for other internet browsers like Edge or Firefox, is because they consume less RAM. Google Chrome is traditionally very resource heavy on your computer. But if I was going to buy, build a new PC, I should say, I wouldn't be using 8GB sticks because I'm not going to get enough RAM to get to what I want. I think I'd need at least 64 gigs to kind of future-proof the PC, which, depending on the size of your motherboard and how many slots you have, necessitates at least 16GB sticks. If you're going up for like a mini ITX board with only 2 RAM slots, you would maybe need to go with 32GB sticks. But mine has 4 slots, as you probably saw in the last selection page. And Corsair Vengeance is typically the very reliable, no frills or lighting option. You can see very bland compared to this. I'm not one for like having a flashy computer. It just sits in a corner, and I just care that it does the job I want it to do for, a reasonable price. So, I would typically probably go with something like this. There is varying speeds of RAM. You can see here, similar to how you can overclock the CPU, you can overclock your RAM. Although if it's rated for a higher speed, then it's not technically overclocking. You're just changing the memory speed, and it gives you some additional performance. So that is something to keep in mind. You can see here that the 6000 speed DDR5 is actually cheaper than the 5600 speed. I believe that you would want to go for this. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't, but I don't remember the RAM stuff as much. So I'm going to pick one of those. And because this is only 2x16, that's 32 gigabytes, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to add a second one. So you'd have a total of 64 gigabytes or 4 16 gigabyte sticks. So you can see right now it's totaling up at $908 reasons why I, have not been keen to rebuild my PC, which I built 5 or 6 years ago, is that it is very expensive. And I could definitely sell off some of the parts in my current one to defray the cost, but it is a lot of money. Now, this is the storage section, so these are the M.2 drives that I was talking about. They're very small, they're almost the size of a stick of gum, maybe a tad bigger. But these are going to be what you use for your primary OS, as well as, anything that you care about that's going to load quickly. A lot of people like to put games on them, or games that have, I guess, strong demands from a storage perspective. If you want to load into things quick, you typically want a quicker drive. So what I think I would probably do is I would probably get 1 or 2 terabytes on an M.2, and then I would have some SSDs additionally for other things. So I'd probably put in a 2 terabyte, and the Samsung Pros and etc. are like top tier. Those are like the best M.2s you can buy from what I remember. There are other brands. There's Western Digital, there's Crucial, there's Seagate. Western Digital is like WDs. If you guys have heard of those, Kingston, Intel. Yeah, but these are in general the kind of de facto, and you can see their M.2 form factor. There are a couple different variations, but 2280 I believe is the typical default. So let's add this, and then add additional storage. We can go with, it's actually not that much cheaper to go with a traditional 2.5-inch SSD, which is interesting. I mean, you could maybe even just go with a hard drive for things that you don't care about the speed of for $65. I could get another 2 gigs of storage. That's kind of the strategy I have now on my PC, is I have a 4 terabyte WD Blue, which is just a hard drive. I have a couple 2.5-inch drives, which I could technically reuse, and I do not have an M.2 currently, so I think maybe I'd go that route and then steal 1 or 2 of the 2.5-inch SSDs that I have now. You are typically supposed to replace your storage, every, some amount of years, because the drives can go bad and corrupt, and you'll lose all the data on them. So to prevent that from happening, you should change your drives every once in a while. Obviously redundancy is preferable, but if it's things that you can, just re-download and get a new drive, like a copy of Call of Duty, for instance, it's not worth having redundant drives for that. So you just take your risk. We can save video card, because I feel like that's going to be the most expensive component. If you guys have, been following the NVIDIA news, that they are the, kind of de facto video card makers, and, has a lot of use cases that are very hot right now, so those are very pricey and hard to get. As far as the case, this is literally like what it sounds like. It's just the case that everything goes into. I did look briefly into these, and I think that I want to go with NZXT, because I think their cases look very nice. And I have one now, actually, but it is a little bit smaller, so I think I want to go with something like this. Maybe in a different color, but the NZXT H7 Flow, which is an ATX mid-tower, so my ATX motherboard will fit in there just fine. And you can see this is pulling the cheapest price from each of these and telling me where I would have to buy it from to get that cheapest price. It's super neat. It'll even factor in like mail-in rebates and that kind of stuff, which is really cool. For a power supply, people kind of go back and forth over how much you really need. From what I've heard, it doesn't really make sense to go over 1,000 for sure, but even 850 for most cases is enough for most people. So I would probably just end up going with something that is one, at least gold rated for efficiency. Platinum and titanium are better, but I think that's, unnecessary. Bronze is, kind of on the lower end. So I'm sticking with gold. Sticking with EVGA because I really like their products. I've had good luck with them. And we would want at least 850 watts. Depending on your video card or what else you got going on, you would maybe need more, but we'll go with the 850 watt EVGA Supernova ATX power supply. Operating system. Don't remember how this works when you buy a new PC, but I think technically you'd have to buy a copy of Windows. I may be able to take it over from my previous computer, I can't remember. And I already have a monitor, so that leaves just the video card. Now, similar to how AMD is caught up to Intel, they are, now considerable rivals to NVIDIA, but I don't think it's as close. So I'd still think that NVIDIA gets the edge out. So if we just go for the RTX cards, which is, NVIDIA GeForce is NVIDIA's line, I would think that I would want at least a 4070 to future-proof. And I don't think I would want to go anything over 4080, but we'll include it just for, our purposes of talking about it. How NVIDIA's naming convention works is the first number is kind of the generation, and then the second number is like where it is in the lineup. So 4th generation, there might even technically be 5th generation, because there was like a series of cards that had numbers less than 1000, so like a 960 or something like that. But this generation has cards that stretch from 60, 70, 80, 90, and then there are modifiers on individual cards, which can get a little tricky. So a 4060 Ti is in between a 4060 and a 4070, and Super is technically better than 4070 as well, but yeah, it gets really messy when they start combining things. But those are less common cards. And then you have individual brands that actually make cards additionally to the NVIDIA Founders Edition ones, which are the ones that NVIDIA puts out. So you can see Gigabyte makes some, Asus makes some, EVGA used to make some, but they've kind of got fed up with NVIDIA's crap, I believe. Zotac and PNY also make them, but they're typically like cheaper, like kind of sketchier cards. But good budget options. And then MSI has kind of a middle of the road opinion, I believe. But so I'd probably stick with Asus, Gigabyte, maybe MSI, but Gigabyte or Asus would probably be my first choice. And we have some different options here. So we have a 4070 for $580. We have 4070 Super for $600. Or we have 4070 Ti Super for $800. So you can see that the jump is pretty drastic. And if you want something like a 4090, you're paying like $2,000 for one card, which is pretty insane. So, I honestly think that I would probably settle for something more in the 4070 Ti to 4080 range. Let's see what a 4080 is going for. They're kind of sold out in a lot of places, which is making them a little harder to find on these type of websites. It might not even have any on here. Here's one for 1660. It's a little rich. But yeah, so for that reason, I'd be kind of leaning towards like a 4070 Super for $600, for instance, which would bring the total bill to almost exactly $2,000. So very expensive. It is, an investment in something you can use for other stuff, and to some degree it holds its value. You can plug and play and add upgrades and stuff later, but there's no denying that it's very expensive. And depending on how long you keep your PCs, significantly expensive than consoles, but you can use it for multiple things. So it's not just gaming. You could use this for work. You could use this for personal stuff. If you do editing or rendering or work with engineering software or any of that stuff, you need high-end computer, and this can fill that void and game at the same time, which is cool. So I think this is probably something along the lines of what I would end up with. If this was interesting to you guys, let me know. But it is something that I used to be super into, and I still somewhat follow, which is why I'm able to just ramble about this stuff. But hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.